that was one of the things that really frustrated me about LulaRoe, was kind of just the way that a lot of the communications were like whisper down the lane. Hey guys, welcome back. If you are new here, I was a LulaRoe consultant from 2015 to 2017, which I always say is kind of at the bottom of the curve when it was still a little bit unknown, right before it really took off and like everybody you know was selling leggings. So I've done a number of different videos about like different aspects of just my personal experience with LulaRoe and different events and things that I've been to. So if you haven't checked out any of my other videos and you're watching this one, you probably would be interested in some of those. So make sure you take a look at my LulaRoe experience playlist. But today I just thought I'd make kind of a short video. I haven't really talked about LulaRoe specifically in a little while, and I was just thinking this morning of all the different ways that when I was with LulaRoe, they used Facebook groups to do so much as far as communicating to different audiences and selling products and, you know, keeping teams together. And I just started thinking of all the different ways that LulaRoe really relied on the Facebook platform specifically to do all this stuff. And so I wrote myself a couple notes I'm just going to refer to, but I just thought I'd kind of go over the different ways that LulaRoe relied on Facebook groups, and then just a couple thoughts about kind of how those groups were used and like different practices when we were doing things in those groups. So one of the first ways that LulaRoe used Facebook groups, and this like slightly predated my time, but in their earliest days, they used Facebook as their main platform to communicate directly with consultants. So around the time that I joined, and even more later on, they used email to like directly email all their consultants, which that makes sense, right? But when they first started, you know, they were small, and I think also a lot of people were, you know, friends, and then like a friend of a friend got invited in. They all kind of knew each other. They just started a Facebook group to keep everybody connected. It was called LulaRoe Skirt Associates, I believe, because remember their first product was the maxi skirt. It wasn't leggings, which everyone thinks. So the group was called Skirt Associates, and at the time I joined, it still existed, and I think it was still in use as a way for like the home office to communicate directly with at least those earliest consultants, who by that point were kind of like the highest up people in rank. But at the time I joined, I know my sponsor like requested to add me to that group, and that request was never approved because they were at that point kind of moving away from using that as a platform. But you might be surprised to hear that originally the Facebook group was kind of the main way that LulaRoe kept in contact with their consultants. So then the next way that groups were used in LulaRoe was communication within teams. So like a leader, you know, whatever level of leadership would start a team for all the people under them, and then like the next level leader would start a team with all the people under them, and so on and so on. So if you were kind of like several layers deep into the pyramid, you might be a member of multiple different groups for, you know, your upline and their upline and their upline and so on. I mean, I was probably a member of maybe only 2 groups. There were like a number of people ahead of me, but some of them were kind of inactive at the time. But I was definitely a member of like a couple different groups. So like one for my sponsor, and then one for, you know, someone above her, and so on. And so when there were, you know, messages sent out that the, you know, home office or, you know, the LulaRoe head of the company would send to their top leadership, like the top level leaders, they would then kind of cascade them down to their leaders and cascade them and so on, which actually that was one of the things that really frustrated me about LulaRoe, was kind of just the way that a lot of the communications were like whisper down the lane, like I'll tell it to you and you pass it to her, and so on and so on. So I don't know if this was done in every one of these groups, but I know in the team of my sponsor, she would post something and tag all of her direct people under her. So like she would tag me, and then she'd say, you guys tag all your teams, and so then each of us would tag the, you know, the people that were directly to us, and so on and so on. So again, it was kind of like a cascading whisper down the lane kind of thing. Very frustrating, you know, easy to misinterpret a message, or change a message as it gets, you know, sent down the different groups. And, you know, a lot of times like there would be questions, and rather than cascade them back up to someone knowledgeable enough to answer them, maybe a leader would just kind of take a stab at like, oh, well, here's what they mean by this, here's what this policy is, blah, blah, blah. And that led to a lot of misinformation and miscommunication. And, you know, also if you're not super active and on top of things on Facebook, very easy to miss a notification like that. Oh, so-and-so tagged you in a comment. Okay, you know, I'm tagged in 1,000 comments. I don't have time to read everyone. So that was not like an ideal way to communicate with a large organization, but again, at the time, they were kind of growing like crazy and sort of working with what they could get. So, I mean, I could see why they started using this again, because they were used to working in that Facebook platform anyway, and it was probably easy enough to be like, oh, leaders, cascade this down to your lines, but really not a good or effective way to do this. So the next way that groups were used, and one that you're probably familiar with even if you never sold LulaRoe yourself, was for LulaRoe consultants to communicate with their customers and conduct online sales. So there was a few things that, you know, consultants would do within their groups. One was just keeping people engaged, keeping the group active, you know, playing different games, posting different funny things just for people to engage with, you know, to keep the group active, which supposedly, you know, according to the algorithm means more people would see it and so on. For me also, I would do things like post about upcoming events or my upcoming availability. So at the beginning of the month, I would make a little calendar graphic and say, you know, I've got, you know, pop-ups on these dates, or I'm going to be at these public events, or like this weekend's going to be a live sale, or, you know, I didn't really do live sales, but like an online, you know, album sale. I would post all those things at the beginning of the month, you know, thinking people might want to plan their LulaRoe shopping for the month. Or if I had, you know, a weekend where I had availability, I would post about that, like, hey, I can take one more customer this weekend or something. So I use the group for that. Also just sharing like LulaRoe news, so sort of in the way that I guess things got cascaded to the consultants. You know, consultants would share with their groups, there's a new style coming out, or I personally am about to add a certain style to my collection, or, you know, some other big news, I'm getting a giant order this week or something. So some kind of LulaRoe news or your own personal LulaRoe news. And then finally, the thing that probably most people know about the Facebook groups is for doing online sales in some kind of way. So for me, I pretty much did all of my online sales through albums in the Facebook group. I guess I should go back in time a little bit. So again, think of 2015-ish. So at that time, there was no online shopping option for LulaRoe. I think they've since added like an actual online thing through their own platform, but at the time it wasn't even allowed technically. Like you couldn't even start your own, you know, shopping cart storefront site. And so to get around that rule, some consultants were like, well, I'll just post a picture of everything I have in an album on Facebook, and people can just write a comment if they want to purchase something, and then I'll send them an invoice through the official LulaRoe platform. So that's how many LulaRoe sales were done. So that's what I did. I'd have an album for each style. I'd have them organized by size. I'm a very organized person. If you watched any of my other videos, you might have picked up on that. So I was very organized about it. Some people would just dump all their pictures in a bucket and say, you know, have fun hunting. That's fun too. But for me, I tried to do it in an organized way, and that meant it was a major headache to keep current and, you know, to keep it all posted, and I would take it down in between and then have to repost everything. So kind of a pain. But anyway, online album sales were one way that people use their groups. A lot of people might also be familiar with the live video sales. So that was a feature that Facebook added in around that time. I don't know, maybe it was like 2016 or so that they started making live videos a thing on Facebook. And so, you know, a lot of people kind of set up their own TV shopping channel kind of setups in their homes to do live sales on Facebook. And a lot of those, you know, I'm sure you've seen, they've gone viral, different quotes or things that happened during some of those sales. I did at least one live sale. Maybe I tried it twice. I never had any success with live sales, so maybe that was just me or just the customers that I had, but I wasn't really a live sale person. But I think a lot of people now think of LulaRoe as primarily being sold that way and not through albums or even like actual in-person events. And then, like I mentioned, later there was different tools and platforms available that would actually give links for shopping online. And so rather than posting all, you know, your whole inventory in an album, you would post a link to shop online through, again, now LulaRoe I think has their own platform, but there were some other tools that people could, you know, pay memberships, I guess, to use these different tools, and they would work kind of similarly. So again, they would use their groups to post the links or post the actual items for their customers. So these were customer groups for consultants to communicate with and sell to their customers. And then sometimes groups were also used for a specific party or event. I didn't really do this. I preferred to set up a Facebook actual event for, you know, for a party, to help promote a party for, you know, for the hostess. And then when the people, you know, joined or RSVP'd to that event, I would send them to my Facebook group where I already had my albums set up for them to shop from. That way I didn't have to, you know, take down all my photos from one place and post them all up in another place. And also it would add new members to my group. But I know some people, just because of the way like notifications and things worked in Facebook, some people prefer to actually create a group for each party. I personally hate that. It's not only LulaRoe. A lot of places create groups for like a one-time event. That really bugs me. But I know some people used groups in that way as well. So just a couple other thoughts, I guess, about Facebook groups. One thing was that it was important within LulaRoe to remove people from those groups, like from the, you know, LulaRoe company group or from your different team groups when they left LulaRoe. Obviously, you know, like if somebody left your company where you work, they wouldn't keep showing up to team meetings. So like, I get that. But what was kind of funny and interesting was like during those times where there were really big mass exoduses of consultants, what I noticed was a lot of team leaders would just start a whole new group and say like, hey, all the active people who are still on my team, just join this new group, rather than trying to go through the members of their existing group and clean up, you know, the ones who had left, because I'm sure it was pretty daunting. And again, with all those different layers, they probably didn't know specifically, you know, who was still active and who wasn't. So that kind of ensured that the people who were still actively there in the group and seeing the messages would see to hop over to the new one. And then I assume that as new people tried to join the new group, they would vet them against, you know, a list of active team members, so that way they'd kind of try to keep it clean. But yes, very important to remove people from all those company groups and pages and things once they left LulaRoe. And then the other thing was for like your personal customer groups, I don't know if this was just something in my team or it was more widespread around LulaRoe, but we were told to remove members from our customer groups if they later joined LulaRoe as a consultant. We also didn't let current LulaRoe consultants join our groups. And I think this was explained as like it was for privacy reasons or like proprietary information reasons. Like maybe, you know, my sponsor would tell us some technique or something that we would then use in our groups, but we didn't want to share it with the other groups. I'm not like 100% sure on the reasoning. I think another thing, whether it was intentional or not, was like it keeps, you know, spies, so to speak, out of your group. So, you know, a lot of people weren't always 100% following, you know, all the policies and procedures. Maybe they were running a sale, you know, that wasn't authorized and advertising lower prices than what was supposed to be advertised. So if you had other consultants in there who knew you were doing that, they could report you to the home office. And so, you know, if you keep those other consultants out, the customers don't know any better, and so that kind of keeps you out of trouble. So I'm not sure if it was like for those kind of reasons as well. And like I said, I'm not sure if it was just kind of something my own sponsor recommended or it was more widespread within LulaRoe, but definitely I know there were a few people who during the time that I was with LulaRoe, ended up joining the company in other teams. And once I saw, you know, that they were posting on their own homepages, you know, I'm a LulaRoe consultant too, I would just delete them out of my group. On the other hand, I think people who were in your own team, who were, you know, directly under you, I don't think would have been a problem to keep them in that group. Again, if it was for proprietary things and you were doing some sales technique that worked well, wouldn't you want them to see that and pick it up and maybe do it for themselves? So not sure about all that, or, you know, the reasoning behind it, but that was definitely something. So I hope you found that interesting. Again, it was just something that sort of popped into my head today, and I was thinking about all the different ways LulaRoe relied on this whole other, you know, company and industry just specifically for most of their communication. So if you have a story about LulaRoe Facebook groups, whether it was, you know, your own experience as a consultant or a group you were in as a customer, something that happened in a sale or something, I would love to hear your stories. So leave me a comment below. Like I said, I have a whole playlist of my LulaRoe experience and different aspects of LulaRoe, so if you like this kind of stuff, check that out. And thank you so much for watching this video. I will see you next time. Bye.